father of the Deaf and Dumb Institute in Mississippi, was mortally wounded here on the 21st and died on the 25th in Leesburg, and then his body was sent home to Mississippi.
I had a delegation out here one time from Mississippi, and that was where I got the information on starting a school for the blind, plus the fact that he said, well, everybody thinks of a Southern colonel as being a big slave owner and having a plantation. He had 54 acres and one slave. He was wounded here on Monday and died on Friday at the so-called Harrison House. Harrison Hall, it is a big 3-story yellow house right on North King Street. A lot of boxwood walk in front of it. He was taken there, and that's where he died. And his body then was sent back to Mississippi.
William Barksdale of the 13th Mississippi, Colonel of the 13th. He was in the Mexican War both as an enlisted man and an officer. He had studied law in Mississippi, was elected to Congress in 1852, and served until the war came on. He was a strong advocate of states' rights. He had a brigade of Mississippi troops in 1862 at Fredericksburg, at Chancellorsville, and was mortally wounded at Gettysburg on the second day. He died in the Union lines the next day, and his body was sent to Jackson, Mississippi. And we've got Colonel Eppa Hutton, Colonel of the 8th Virginia Infantry, in command here at Leesburg, May and June of 1861. He was in the Battle of First Manassas. Hutton was a lawyer by profession, Commonwealth's attorney in Prince William County. He was wounded at Gettysburg, made Brigadier General in 1863. He was captured at Sailor's Creek. He was a representative and senator in National Congress and died in 1908.
I think you can see from that, and one of the reasons we did it, to show you how inexperienced these people were. There were probably more lawyers here than there were military men. And a few of the Confederates had been blooded, to use the expression, had been in the Battle of First Manassas, but none of the Union people had ever seen the elephant. I mean, that was an expression that was used to someone who had been wounded or who had been heard shots fired in anger. Okay, to go on with it a little bit, to further identify, and this is of interest, of the 15th and 20th Mass, but more particularly the 20th Massachusetts Infantry. It was called the Harvard Regiment. It had rather a distinguished career. It was made up principally, as I said, of the Blue Bloods of New England. They went throughout the war. From their ranks came 9 brigadier generals and 2 major generals before war's end. They lost something like 2,500 men from first to last. So they had a very distinguished career. This was their baptism of fire. And Tracy will give you some of the names I think can be identified.
This is a young soldier writing home from Conrad's Ferry, October 22nd, 1861.
That's present-day White's Ferry, Conrad's.
Dearest Mother, we marched all night and arrived here this morning in a pouring rain. All along the road we met men of the 15th Massachusetts who told us their regiment had crossed, been surprised by a superior force, and very much cut up. A good many of them were in their shirts, having thrown off their clothes to swim. We thought they exaggerated the story, but imagine how we felt on arriving here to find that not only the 15th, but the 20th, in which we have so many friends, had suffered terribly, and especially the officers. Willie Putnam was wounded and probably cannot recover. Jim Lowell, his cousin, is wounded, I don't know how badly, and Schmidt, their captain, also. John Putnam has lost an arm. Poor Wendell Holmes has a ball through the leg and one through the lung. All these were taken down to the hospital of Cruiseville this morning in a canal boat. Of the 15th, there are only 3 or 4 of the company officers left, the rest killed and missing. General Baker of the California Regiment was killed. This was written by Robert Gould Shaw, who was in the 20th Mass and later would go on to be the leader of the 54th Massachusetts, the colored regiment that many of you may be familiar with the movie Glory. And he's writing about a lot of people, a lot of men, young men who he knew, people he'd grown up with. A lot of these names, they were related, they may have been cousins, they were related by marriage a lot of times. So when you're hearing these names, oftentimes it was one family feeling the effects of losing several. people, not just one.
Wendell Holmes that he mentioned was Oliver Wendell Holmes, who went on to become Justice on the Supreme Court and lived to be about 91 or 2 years old. Holmes suffered a wound right at the corner, far corner of that cemetery, and was taken back across the river. He escaped being captured. In 1924 or 25, I had heard related by some of the people around Leesburg that he was still on the Supreme Court, and he used to come out here in his chauffeur-driven car and sit out here and talk to anyone who would listen of his experiences at the battle that day. It's a shame we didn't have a tape recorder. And speaking of his, I'm going to throw a lot of these things in at you from time to time. You can go home now if you don't want to hear him. He was on the Supreme Court. He was some 91 or 2 years old, and he and a fellow octogenarian were walking down the street one day, and they passed two lovely ladies. And he leaned on his cane and turned and stared, and he said, "Oh, to be 70 again." So that's some of the characters that we had here that day, and I think that is one of the things that has made this feel so interesting to researchers, to the casual person, to anyone that stops and reads. All right, let's pick it up. McClellan had assured the safety of Washington. At the same time, the Confederates with their command post was over at Manassas, or better yet, let's say Centerville. Joseph P. Johnston is in command of the Confederate forces, and after the Battle of Manassas, there was a brigade of 3 Mississippi regiments, 13th, 17th, 18th, and the 8th Virginia sent over here, plus the Richmond Howitzers and artillery battery. And they had been sent here as more or less an outpost, as an anchor on the end of the line. Loudoun County has 37 miles of riverfront on the Potomac River. The bridges at Corner Rocks, Brunswick, and Harpersferry had been burned on the 9th of June. But there are several, or many, low-water crossings, fords, where you could wade across. So consequently, Maryland had not seceded, so we became a frontier here. So General Johnston placed Colonel Evans here with these 4 regiments as an outpost, and to try to prevent any invasion across here, or at least to sound the alarm if there was an invasion at any time. It had remained reasonably peaceful along here. In fact, the music, All Quiet on the Potomac, had been written during this time of, let's say, August and September, when the Confederates and Union people were relatively friendly. We have evidence of a Union dentist coming across the river to visit an old classmate of his from Fredericksburg. Some of the Confederates went across and had lunch with their Yankees. They were only enemies at the time that they were shooting at one another. So things were relatively quiet here, this being the outpost. It began, starting in mid-October, it began to pick up a little steam. The radicals in Washington were beginning to get on McClellan. They finally got him out later on, but now they wanted some action. He, being a very cautious man, was still trying to reorganize and restore some confidence in the armed services, which had been badly shattered at First Manassas. So as October came along, as I say, they became somewhat restless. They wanted action. So on Saturday, the 19th, this battle was fought on the 21st of October on a Monday. On Saturday, Johnson had pulled back most of his units closer into Manassas, or to the Centerville line. He had not disturbed the one here at Leesburg. The Union signal station over here at Sugarloaf Mountain, anywhere you travel around here, Sugarloaf is looking right down your throat. Whoever controlled Sugarloaf knew the activities of everyone within an area of maybe 25 miles around here. So the Union signal station over here at Sugarloaf gave the word to McClellan that Johnson was consolidating his forces somewhat. So McClellan sends out a division of Pennsylvania Reserves under McCall, send them out to Drainesville, which all of you are familiar with, right down Route 7 here. They sent them out to Drainesville to send out patrols from there. In fact, on the 20th, a Sunday morning, McClellan sent a message to General Stone, who is over here at Poolsville. General McCall reached Drainesville yesterday and is still there today. Will send out patrols in all directions. Perhaps a demonstration on your part would have the desired effect of moving the rebels. All he's asking for is some demonstration. He hopes that he will throw some fear into Evans and Evans will withdraw. Well, Evans had begun to withdraw until on that Saturday afternoon, Confederate patrols had captured a Union messenger that gave them a key to the whole thing. That McCall was only a threat. He was not moving on Leesburg, but he also was getting ready to move back toward the old Georgetown Pike and Chain Bridge on it. Evans knew this long before Stone over here knew it. So Evans knew that he could use the few troops that he had here in the defense of Leesburg. So he remained here. He had one regiment, the 8th Virginia, which we'll go into in a little while, down at the Burnt Bridge, which was over Goose Creek, right down at the where the golf course is today. And he had one regiment watching Edwards Ferry, which is 3 miles below here. He had a company up here at Smart's Mill, which no longer is in existence. It's about a half a mile above here. It's between here and Conrad's Ferry, or White's Ferry it is today. So on that Sunday, that Stone received this message from McClellan that McCall is there today to send out patrols in all directions. And Hall is still on his way back, not coming here any further. So to comply with that order, General Stone orders Colonel Devens, as he mentioned, who has the 15th Mass, to occupy the island. We'll show you the island and the stream between here and the island. To occupy the island and send that patrol out. So about midnight, 20 men under a Captain Philbrick came across the river in small boats, came up the path. You will be shown the path a little bit later, and that path was nothing more than a cattle or animal trail going down to water. They came up the path and they moved inland. He reached a point out here on this housing development. Thank goodness the developers left a tree there. That tree was not there at the time of the battle, but it is a relatively old tree. But that is a point that Captain Philbrick reached. It was a bright moonlight night, described with some autumn haze, and he looked toward Leesburg, and he saw a row of tents, but he did not encounter any pickets. He moved back. He sends a messenger across the river to General Stone saying that he had seen the enemy encampment, but did not encounter any pickets and thought maybe they had retired. With that, General Stone ordered Devens to send over another battalion of his men. They crossed in these small boats. We might mention the boats, they had 2 skiffs and 1 large flat-bottom boat. The large boat would hold about 40 men. The skiffs maybe 10 or 12 each. They were plagued all day, and that is what caused their disaster, was a lack of boat power. Many years ago, a retired general came to Loudoun County, and he wrote some articles on this, and he said in it that this was a lesson in military